Good morning, good evening, afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Thanks for
Good morning.
joining us today. Exciting topic today, one that is, or at least should be, on everyone's mind, and why are cloud costs in general, and more specifically, observability costs, on the rise in the past few years, and what can we do to reduce them, right, without damaging our ability to identify, resolve, and prevent issues. I'm joined today by two much smarter than I am folks on the practice of observability and optimizing the costs involved in running applications and infrastructure monitoring. We have Spiros Econom. I'm already going to mess it up, Spiros. I apologize. Economic and Jez Rabinovich. Spiros is the director of product ops over here at Mattermost, and Chez is our co-founder and CTO here at Groundcover. And I'm Mike Moore. I'm our solutions architect here at Groundcover, and I'll be moderating today. But these guys will certainly share a lot of useful and actionable information that we can all use and take back with us and start implementing in our environments pretty immediately. Now, before we jump in, love to remind everyone that we've got a QA box that's open right now. It'll remain open until the end of the webinar. Please send any and all questions in throughout the session. We'll do our best to address any and all of them as we go. But more importantly, you're not here to listen to me talk. You're listening to, like I said, these much too smarter gentlemen here. So let's kick it off with the first questions. Some of these questions will be directed to specific members of the panel, but by all means, feel free, you guys, to interject, add anything you want. Hopefully, a little bit more of a lively conversation and not the interview style here if we can help it. So awesome. Great. Well, with that, let's dive right in. So thinking of cloud costs in general, right, and more specifically in the observability space, right, costs have been on the rise for some time now, right. I've spent years at places like your CA Technologies of the world and Datadogs and Splunk, and I've seen those bills and they go up and up and up and up, right, over time. And I'd love to kind of understand, how do you think we kind of got to this point, though? And that's for either of you.
I think we can start with traditionally blame microservices, right? We can always start to blame microservices and orchestration, but basically what it did is helped us scale our development and product a lot easier, and to build and ship product faster. Obviously, I'm not going to go into this argument of good or bad microservices, but that's the fact that people adopted microservices, and microservices actually increase the interactions between components, right? Because before that, we just gonna call a function, but now we're gonna do an API call. And why just an API call? Let's make it a bit more sophisticated. Let's do it some Kafka, maybe pass it
Event
through
bus.
SQL.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's pass it
yeah.
through S3 bucket, and then SQS, and maybe then another S3 bucket, and then Postgres, and you get the point. So and then with more moving parts, I think everything got much more complicated to troubleshoot. So now we need a lot more logs, and we have a lot more microservices that can generate logs. And I'm saying logs not because I'm a fan of logs, but that's the reality. Most companies that we see actually still using logs as their main, developing main troubleshoot source of data. So now we have a lot of data being generated by machines that we don't care, right? Because it's most of it is very repetitive. And on the other hand, we have vendors that makes money from volume of data. So they're waiting for you to just emit non-important logs, and they don't have any incentive to help you find out what really you need, because it will damage their income. So you have on one side you have frustrated developers that's trying to solve problems. On the other hand, you have vendors that the entire pricing model is built around volume of data. So they encourage you to send more data that you don't really need, and boom, you got the perfect the perfect problem. Like you have one side that enjoy it, and the other side doesn't have any other solution. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing companies trying to reduce observability data, which is insane. Like I don't know any other domain that's trying to reduce volume of data. So that's my take. I don't know how you see it, Spears.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Actually, I was talking recently to some friends, that the technology has been progressed all these years, right? And all these years, as you said, we founded microservices. Then we had Docker Swarm. Then we had Kubernetes. Then we had, probably we're going to have something else in a few years, right? So all this increasing complexity produces a lot of metrics, right? So you need to right now check what is happening in Kubernetes, what exactly is the node levels, what are the events for the jobs, for the containers, for all these things which are running in Kubernetes. And all these are producing logs apart from metrics. How I'm going to store these logs? Where should I process them? Should I keep them forever? What is the retention, right, which I need to keep? And apart from this, you have, apart from the technological aspects, you have also, the contractual agreements, the compliance part. Okay, I have customers right now, and I need these logs for a year. I need these logs for these metrics for a year because someone is gonna ask them because they need some audit, they need some proof. You have the service credits, you have all these things in a contractual agreement. So all these actually created the perfect complicated problem and make the observability even bigger or what it was before. And I totally agree with you just about the volume based, right? It's let's say a couple of if you talk with small startups, with small businesses, even with big enterprises, there are cases they don't understand. I'm sending metrics, and I need to be 1-2 hours per day to see if I sent more than I should because my plan is going to charge me more right now,
Mm.
right? So all these things actually, or the complete, the complexity of microservices, of the containerized environments, the new Kubernetes technology, and all the other things, plus the contractual agreements, plus the volume based, as you mentioned, says they create actually the perfect problem, right? And the perfect problem to make money. That's the other interesting part, right? So because you have all this volume, all these logs, all this retention, all this data, all these agreements, and this multiply heavily. Even in our side, right, we're also having a Mattermost cloud. In the growth days, the growth was we had multiple workspaces running, in Mattermost. We had a big issue, right? Like 35% of observability was around actually in AWS Cloud Bill. And it was like, oh, it's 35%. It's only the observability. And let me mention that all our stack actually, because we are an open source company, it's open source, right? We use Grafana, we use Loki, we use Prometheus, Thanos, all these things. So if you think about it right now, let's combine all this complexity again, right? I need Thanos, I need Prometheus, I need Loki, I need Grafana, and combine all these things along with data which you need to retain. So yeah, this actually multiplied, I think, the problem. And if you see right now what's happening also with AI, machine learning, generative AI, more machines to spin up, more data, more logging, right? Heavier actually machines, right? So this, I think, the next year is gonna grow even more of what we see today.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
I
great,
agree.
guys. I mean, I know we're only one question in here, but I'm gonna go off script just because not now you got me thinking as well. Right, you talk about retention, and that's the one that I've come across right throughout my career in observability, and I always find it fascinating, right? Because at the end of the day, the question I always got is, what do you really need that for? Like, do you really need 7 years worth of logs? And if you do, I'd love to know why, but I mean, what's kind of your take on some of these crazy retention periods? I mean, is it just for the sake of, I'm going to use the words CYA, right? Is it for the sake of covering all the bases? Is it what is it that's kind of driving these increasingly long retention periods? Because over time, who cares what happened? I mean, not much less 5 years ago, but 3 months ago. Like you're not going to go solve a problem from 3 months ago generally with a log, even though it's generally speaking, I've rarely seen that be the case, but it is a huge cost driver. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good angle because I think we as developers, as engineers, we kind of failed the test of some grown ups came and said, "Look, guys, security incidents can happen, right? And it's okay, everything is okay, but we will need to find out what exactly happened." And the only good solution that we thought of is, let's store all the logs for 7 years. Um, it's ridiculous, right? Because of the first problem that we just send unnecessary logs. Now you're gonna save those unnecessary logs that you know not gonna help you in case of an incident for 7 years. And from the numbers that we see from our customers, it depends on the industry, but some industries are leaning towards a year of compliance, year logs, and and I think they don't have the tools usually to fine tune what is important for to keep for a year or 7 years or whatever. Because, for instance, if I would say let's keep all dev environment logs for 7 years, you would say it's crazy, right? You don't need that. You don't care. And so if I think the problem is tooling, because what you really want to do is write less logs, more meaningful, being able to categorize them. For instance, this namespace is production. Okay, I have a lot of production workloads, but you don't care about them. Monitoring and backups and CI/CD stuff that you don't need. You want to protect what actually needs to be protected. So just you want to keep those logs for a year or 3 years or whatever. And if you combine those two things, I think it makes sense to save it, right? It's like saving camera records, right? If it's a bank, you understand that it could take a while for you to understand someone is stealing from you. So then you want to kind of rewind, right? But you're not going to put 2000 HD cameras inside the room. That would be just weird. So I think that's the way we need to go. We need to fine grain our logs and to be able to customize the retention. Obviously, and we need to offload it to a cheaper storage, which is another layer, because you can say, okay, those logs are important, but after 7 days, after a month, I'm going to put it somewhere very cheap, very expensive to fetch, because I know when I need it, I'm going to break the glass and fetch it. So I think that should be the way to go there.
Yeah, I actually agree with Jez. To be honest, if from all these logs, from all these metrics, I would say if we go 1 month retention, let's say 2 months retention, I think we'll be fine to see patterns and other things, and then push all these in a long-term storage where where our frozen data, which you can access whenever you want. Where I see though the value in terms of logging, when we're talking about audit logs, right? Audit logs are really important. You need to have this data because maybe it's something which is going to be deciphered, from these logs. So in terms of security, I would say audit log is the most important. In terms of performance and others, frozen data will work. It will be expensive, and you will rethink if you want to access them and see, the patterns. It will be harder for you. So I totally agree. I think only audit logs will be the most important, for security reasons, especially if you're a bank and other things. Probably you need to think about more, how these things you need to be stored. But other than that, let's be honest. I mean, when we check, performance in a cluster, right, or in an application level, or in a node level, do we see all the baseline 1 year before? I don't think that, that nobody does this. I think we can see the month or like the last 2 weeks, identify any blind spots after a change of a configuration or something. But all the other data we can store them, but in somewhere in a long-term storage, right, which can reduce the price of the storage significantly. I would say even sometimes do not, because some of these data are already there. Let's be honest. AWS has a couple of data already. You have already metrics, you have already logs, you have already a couple of things. Should I restore them? That's another question we need to make, right? Should I we restore them somewhere else? AWS gives also some kind of retention, not as big as you want in some cases, but you should think about, yeah, the data is already there. Should I restore them somewhere else?
Absolutely. No, yeah, that's I do see a lot of folks wanting to offload that stuff, especially the real long term storage, like your Glacier
Yeah.
storage, right? Or I mean, well, to the point of keeping data, right? I mean, here in the U.S., you're supposed to keep your taxes for 7 years, and of course, I do. Um, right? It's a, so storing logs at some point just seems wild sometimes. But anyway, that's awesome, guys. So we'll get a
Yeah,
little back.
but
What's that?
how many if I'll take the taxes information you need to store right in
Right.
JSON,
That's
I'll assume it's probably gonna be 10K, 20K compressed,
right.
right? We're
How
seeing we have customers sending us you know 50 terabytes a day compressed.
mhm.
Okay, so I think we yeah it comes from the right idea, but
Mhm.
I think the implementation is kind of broken.
Oh, that makes sense. And I guess to that point, I guess kind of this, we talked a little bit about some of this already, but what are some of the kind of main challenges you guys are seeing that businesses, other organizations are facing kind of when it comes to managing some of these additional costs, right? Logs is definitely one, but now you got the rise of things like tracing and real user monitoring and synthetic. There's a way to bill for everything, right? Right. And so, I mean, have you guys found some of the like what are some of the main challenges and maybe some of the solutions right around that? Those other costs that are creeping in here.
From my perspective, with working with customers and migrating from vendors like Datadog and New Relic, I think most of them are, oh, and also open source stack. I think most of them are with trouble with the high cardinality of metrics because it's kind of complicated. You want the cardinality to solve to find out the root cause of something, but you don't always understand what the implication will be, right? So imagine that you have, let's take something small, 300 nodes. You're running, let's say, 5,000 pods. Okay,
Hmm.
if you're gonna add a pod name label and you're rolling out 3 or 4 times a day and have some spot instances that's changing the pods every time, and you just want to count HTTP requests, you're probably gonna end up with millions of active time series just for that, and that's very basic. We're not talking about some custom business unit. So I think that cardinality and the way we treat metrics and the tools we have today are not there yet in terms of the data that we want to have. So that's the second thing that we see. We see companies having trouble with high cardinality, and I think most of it could be solved with stream aggregation. Aggregate the metrics before you store it. Drop the pod label. Just create a histogram or just max count. Mean or quantiles, and you can live with that. Most of the time, you can live with that because you don't really care about that specific pod. Other approaches to save it for short retention, but it's very complex setup. So I always go for stream aggregation. I always tell our engineer, if we can move something from the read pipeline or store pipeline to the write pipeline, to
Hmm.
data ingestion pipeline, it's 100% worth it. Everything you can do on the right pipeline, and we even take it further to the node level. So we do the stream processing and aggregation at each and every node, and
Hmm.
then again in the same cluster, and then again at the backend. You can reduce even network costs, but we didn't even talk about that. But network costs are insane. So I think metrics is really a big problem.
Yeah, and the other thing is actually, I think it's a problem, more holistic from, or the organization side. We have the engineers, we have the DevOps, or the SREs, whatever model you have, right? It depends on the model you have. I think sometimes there's no agreement on what is important, right? In the end of the day, we start creating metrics, right? I want this metric, I want this metric, I want this metric. But in the end, there is no consensus in the business level, in the engineering level, in the SRE, in the DevOps mindset between these two organizations, the ends and the ops people. What are the most important metrics? What are the most important logs we need to keep around, right? So we introduce metrics without really, following what is the business KPIs. That's one. What are the SLIs and the SLOs we want to achieve based on the SLA agreements we have, which are the most important, versus introducing more and more and more and more. And sometimes we never use them, to be honest. So metrics definitely is one, and I totally agree with Cez. And the other thing is the logging. I mean, how we log. There is another problem. There is a huge problem there. In terms of logging, right? You will see that there are different kinds of schools out there. There are schools that extreme verbosity. There is a school of really small verbosity and focus on the most important, uh, logic. But I have seen both worlds. I have seen the worlds of extreme verbosity, even simple warnings which don't give you much value, right? You don't care a lot. They can just give you an indication something bad happened. But if nothing happens in the application, the customer doesn't understand that something happened. Why there should be a log for just warning, right? So I think we need to shift the mentality, how we log, how we define metrics, and how we work, together also in both worlds, engineering and operation is a DevOps mentality and the culture, so we can become better on how we define this data and what is important for the company and for the troubleshooting. That's another thing which actually at least hit us hard internally. Yeah.
No, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I
Oh, go ahead.
agree. I agree about the what is important, but I also think what the worst nightmare for a DevOps engineer or any SRE is unknown, right? So you don't know what metrics you need. So
Exactly.
the automatic reaction for it is, all right, I need everything because I don't know
Everything.
what will happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we should probably fight back a little bit and say, no, you don't need to trace. You don't need 100% sampling. It doesn't make sense to trace 100% sampling. But I also think that we need to make the whole data ingestion a lot cheaper and allow ad hoc queries to run a bit slower, but allow us to run things that we thought are not important. So, for instance, if you take a Facebook approach, the wide events approach, so you create a lot of events with a lot of dimensions, and you don't store that as traditional metrics. But then when you need to investigate, you kind of have this ability to group by, visualize every one of those dimensions. So, and you're willing to pay the extra 20 seconds of the query because you're actually
Yeah.
fetching 10 billion rows unstructured and do it
Yeah.
ad hoc. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
I,
very
I think I think that's why a lot of observability solutions that's starting today are going towards analytics databases, like obviously ClickHouse, that are built for analyzing ad hoc data, raw data at large scale. Because I think we kind of shifted to this mindset of let's store the events in a cheap way, compress, and ad hoc queries will take maybe a little bit more, but they will run.
yeah.
Um,
What is interesting says on this is like, to be honest, with our domination of AI right now, if we think one step further, what should we have something which sends only that necessary data which are important? I mean, this eventually is going to happen. Let's be honest. Generative AI is there, is going to become better and better and better. In 5 years, maybe it's like, okay, right now we have the AI, machine which it's a pass through, millions of metrics, and in the end, just gives five, because these are the five important things which you need to have in the end, right? Because maybe we understand better the business domain model, right? Because we have trained, the AI to understand better the model we have, or what the service does. So it's easier for us to go and say, okay, send 1 million, but in this ClickHouse, or it's going to end up only what is important in the end of the day, versus have all these you have defined, because I don't know, or because the collaboration between DevOps and engineers wasn't that good at the beginning of writing the service, and this was increasing the
mm,
complexity. So
mm.
I think that's another perspective. There's there is also some people already trying to do that out there. To be honest, I think there are a few of your competitors trying to do something around this, which is an interesting aspect. I'm not sure if the AI is ready today to do that, but definitely it's an interesting thing. Okay, how we send only what is important versus send everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're not ready in terms of AI selecting the data ad hoc,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I do think we can use AI to take a look at the high level metrics that are very easy to compress and very easy to query, and then being able to detect, change points or, specific services that are having some interaction with broken services, and add some filters that allow you to narrow down to million events, which is easy to queryable.
Yeah,
So I kind of believe in the view of slice and dice. Like, we want to make sure we can analyze statistics very fast and to fetch specific
exactly.
events using some kind of slice and dice approach.
Yeah, and find outliers in the node levels, in the service level, and so on. Change point, as you mentioned. I think that's the important part versus just going to capture everything. Just capture, as you said, the slice and dice. Actually, that's important. But I think AI is gonna do it. To be honest, I think
Hmm.
there's some models which can help already on this. If I'm not wrong, but we are far away from we have
Yeah,
AI and that's this all for us. But in 5 years, who knows? That's an interesting thing, which
yeah,
maybe we should think all of us, okay, how we use AI to make it easier and capture what is needed.
yeah. I agree.
Awesome. And I guess, to that point, Spiros, I mean, think about some of the strategies, excuse me, that you've gone after, right, to balance that need for some of the detailed observability. It sounds like it'd be better maybe to pare some of that stuff down. But I mean, what have you guys done to kind of help, balance that need for more detail, but with some of that cloud cost, how do you balance that out?
Yeah, first is about challenge. If we need another observability tool, that's that's the first thing, right? And why? And what is the problem we are trying to solve? And this is how I started everything. Because the people, they are coming with ideas, right? We are actually very open, to innovate and try things and try new tools and so on. And everyone is coming like, okay, there is Tempo, let's do tracing. There is eBPF, for example, as you guys do, right? There's eBPF, let's try eBPF. Every time I'm trying to to answer these questions and challenge the people is like, okay, why we need tracing, right? Why is important tracing? Who's going to use it, right? What the problem we are trying to solve? What is the most critical endpoint we want to observe, in terms of the tracing aspects and metrics? Most of the times there is no answer. To be honest, most of the time there is no answer. Oh yes, this is super critical and we need to measure this thing, right? And how it interacts with other services. Like, yeah, it's nice to have. It's another tracing metric tool to have. And this is also, another important aspect to see, in checking your teams and validate with your teams what is the outcome and what you're trying to solve and what is the problem. That's one. Couple of things we tried, is to create a lot of awareness internally. This is also FinOps practice and so on. So we created, a couple of alerting. You deploy, you own. So it's your cost. So there are a lot of couple of these kind of things, mentality that, okay, we deployed this, we have this kind of services. Okay, this is the cost, for your services. As they scale, as they change in terms of monitoring, in terms of other aspects, right? This is the bill for the team, and there are some kind of thresholds we set internally, and we have a collective group, who works all together. Verbosity is one of the other things, right? We have a manifesto internally. We call the reliability manifesto, where we're trying, to focus only on what is important in terms of logging, because there were, observations in the past. We're trying to overlog versus just log what is needed. I'm not saying that we fixed that totally. It's still happening. It's an issue sometimes, but we've done a lot of job there. Another practice we follow is, we want to have very good resource usage and very good data and the cost reporting. So what we're trying to do is, because there are the mentalities out there for Kubernetes that everything is running in the same nodes, right? If you have everything in the same nodes, you have Prometheus, Thanos, whatever in the same nodes, along with the other services, it's very hard to identify what does it cost more for you, right? Or is it the monitoring which needs more resources, or other service which more resources? Sometimes you are oversizing because there is a side effect. So what we do is, we create different kind of node groups. So we have great, good tagging to understand this is the node groups which is running the monitoring and observability in our multi-tenant clusters. Then find what is the cost there, and optimize the data storage we discussed, right? So we don't keep everything. We keep some things, because of contractual agreements, which is 1 year tension. But we're trying also, to start, and this is an initiative we do right now, to start pushing this in a long-term storage versus keep them forever. And teamwork, I would say, because if you think about all these things we just mentioned, is about how all these teams are working together, how all these teams are coming in a consensus, how all these teams are understanding, what is the cost, and how we can become better in terms of awareness internally, cross-functionally. Not the SRE knows what does it
Sure.
cost, right? So it's about spreading the ownership in multiple people, so that everyone understands that, okay, if I do this change, this is gonna cost dominator. If I need to keep more data, this is the cost. So this is our current actually strategy. And we do also, forecasting and projections, which I believe every company does. If you want to grow, it's the forecasting projections every year. Okay, what will be if we change, from 8,000 workspaces to 15,000 workspaces this year, in a Mattermost cloud. So we do some projections there. What will be the observability costs? What would be, the cost about our customers and other things like that. So yeah, that's in a high level.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And then I guess, kind of taking this further, and of course, this wouldn't be a great marketing event without a little bit of questions about ground cover here. So Ches, I'm gonna tap you in here. But thinking about this is something we think about a lot here at ground cover, right? Is customer cost at the end of the day, right? And kind of with the unique architecture, keeping all of the customer data in their own cloud, right? Ches, maybe can you explain a little bit more about how this effectively facilitates a bit of a different and unique pricing model, right? Reducing that whole total cost of ownership, right? In general.
Yeah. So basically, because so what we did is we thought, how can we make the pricing model decouple from volume of data? Because we realized exactly what Spiro is saying. We realized that customer doesn't have more value correlated to the volume of data. We want to get money from customers if they get more value. So we realized we need to take the volume of data out of the equation. And we thought, how are we going to do that? Because if we're just not going to charge you by volume, you would not believe what customers will send. Like, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of logs per second, just because, someone wrote some logs in the hot path. So we thought, how can we solve this? How can we basically not charge by volume, but also don't need to pay for that volume as well as a vendor that's going to store it? And we realized we want to be on the same page or aligned with our customers. So we don't make money from you sending more data, and we also doesn't pay for it. So, okay, now we can solve this problem together. We have the same goal. So all the data, the control plane is a ground cover SaaS, but all the data plane is in your account in a dedicated clusters that we scale up. And then we can come to the table as one team trying to solve what do you really need? What are your requirements? Do you need that metric? Look at that. This service generated 1 billion logs in the last 2 days. Do you need it? Maybe we need to convert it to metrics. Maybe you don't need it and you just didn't know about that. So the in-cloud architecture basically is a technical term, but what it enables us is alignment with our customers. So we can, I've talked to a lot of engineers working on different observability vendors, and they're all kind of, they have features in their platform that they don't want to use because their AE gonna get annoyed because they cost the cost in half because they drop some logs that the customer didn't need. Right. So we eliminated that at once because we don't get money according to the volume. So it's a long story to tell you that I think it's a shift of how we look at things. What is the problem? The same thing that Spiros talked just a few seconds ago. We're looking at the problem and helping the customer solve the dedicated specific problem that the customer has. So what is the data needed, and we can scale accordingly. So everybody wins, right? The world wins. We don't store garbage data because no one need it. Customer wins because they don't need to pay a lot for data they don't need, and we win because we have happy customers and we don't need to pay for the data. So
Sure,
I think it's
that
a
makes
it's a
sense.
win-win.
Awesome. No, that's great. And then so to that vein, Spiros, right? And we're coming down to the last few questions, guys. So bear with me here, but I mean, thinking about the investment that you make in observability tools versus say other operational tools, right? How do you prioritize that investment, and how do you kind of adjust based on kind of all of the things we've been talking about here?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm not sure if you are, aware with PicChart. The PicChart is about, the return of investment and the level of effort, right? So what I'm trying every time with the team to do is what I told you before, it's one, what problem we're trying to solve. Secondly, is what is the effort we're going to spend on this, right? And what is the return of investment? Because it's tightly connected with a problem, right? So let's say that if we're going to start doing eBPF, what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? And what is the return of investment, not only for the SREs, but cross-functionally, and how useful is that? Similarly, with tracing and other things. This is actually, I would say, the combination which I'm trying not to follow, not only for the observability tooling, to be honest, but also, for every effort we're trying to do internally, because it's actually how we want to quantify the impact for internal users and for external customers, because this is important for us. And right now, let's be honest, Grafana, Prometheus, Thanos, Loki, it's a level of effort. It's a high level of effort, right? Of course, it's something which we were able to optimize a lot. We're in a much better state than before. There are still practices you can do, to keep the costs down, but this doesn't mean that the costs down as you scale. As you scale, probably the costs are coming more and more and more and more. So that's something we're trying also to consider and see what are the practices we follow. But that's the strategy overall.
Got it. No, that makes good sense. And I just noticed. Sorry, I've been so enthralled with what's going on here. I missed the question here in the Q&A, so I want to make sure we address that. So Paul was asking here if logs are still relevant, right, in the same way as we used to think of them when we have robust tracing. So, for example, using better better tracing with things like eBPF and OpenTelemetry and some of these other things and combining them. I mean, do we really need the level of logs that we used to? I guess I think that's the question still. Um, yeah, what do you guys think?
I think it depends how you define log and trace, right? Because it's basically a key value structure of events, and trace has some kind of latency, and log is just like single point in time. So I actually read the OpenTelemetry manifest few times and still did not. I'm not sure I realized what's the difference, but I think if you look at it as a high level approach, I think the logs are events that we not necessarily put some effort and thought in it. We just type some strings and then, just, oh, you know what, I'm going to send the database.
Mhm.
What database? What are you going to send? What are you expecting to get? How often does it happen? Like, what's the request ID? What customer are you serving? All of that is optional, right? Is if you did that, great, you're a great developer. If you didn't, still you can read the log and and realize you have some missing data, and then go back, add the missing data, and redeploy, and all of that. So I think the shift to traces is, to me, the shift that with like Honeycomb has been talking about it for years, to move to some kind of structure events, structure logs. And so at that time, traces kind of resembles a log. So I think traditional logs where you just type strings, expect someone to read it line by line. I
Hmm.
think, yeah, I think we should aim for better. But structure events, logs or traces, or even metrics. I
Hmm.
think that's the way to go. We want to make the data easily processable by machines. So
Hmm.
you want structure, you want to add all the attributes, you want to add more attributes that you think you would need, and you want to store it efficiently. Yeah, that's my take about logs versus trace. It kind of avoided the actual question.
Yeah, to be honest, actually depends a lot, right? Tracing gives you some value. I'm not sure if it gives you exactly the problem. Maybe give you some information, but not exactly the problem. For me, it's like logs are still, valuable. We definitely are not doing them correctly, as just mentioned, right? I think for me, it's like probably is a combination of all of them, to be honest, but focusing mostly, in metrics and tracing, where you can, combine, for example, okay, there is something happening, and I can combine with information from the infrastructure or container level information to identify what is the issue, though the context of the issue maybe is missing there because you need to do a deep dive. This is where I see the logs are important, right? Because if you did it semi perfect, not perfect, the logging, probably you have some valuable information in there which gives you what was the root cause. But that's not the case always, right? So I believe still logs, they will take some play here. Definitely, we need to identify how we structure them, standardize them more based on on industry standards, which is very hard because the business domain is different for everyone. It's different for different kind of companies, for from small to mid-size to enterprises. So probably that's the hardest part. But I think it's a valuable information combination, though, right? You have the indications from the trace and the infrastructure.
Hmm.
Logs will give you probably the root cause if you have done some good job there, right? Not the perfect, but some good job there.
Awesome. No, that's great, guys. Appreciate that. And then we've got a final question here on our journey, and this one's for you. As we've been talking through all of this and we've talked through all of the different challenges and issues. I mean, whether coming, say, from an open source solution already in place, right? Spiros, you kind of mentioned like, hey, that's some work there, or whether coming from, right, and there's obviously an operational cost that exists with that kind of thing, and then with the commercial tooling, right, there's obviously the volume problems that we've talked about. But just can you kind of walk through maybe one of the folks that have come to ground cover kind of coming out of significantly impacting their ability to manage their cloud costs a little better while improving or at least maintaining that level of visibility they had today.
Yeah, sure. I think it happens every day. When we talk to customers before using ground cover, they most of the time don't cover their dev environments and not even their staging environments. Which, if you think about it, this is kind of it's insane because you want to find bugs, right? We all been taught that you want to find bugs in dev because it's a lot cheaper to fix, and if not in staging. But if you go to production, that's a whole different thing. So we want to have extra observability on dev and staging, and that's not even talking about dev velocity, which basically is what we're trying to improve and to push in any direction, especially in the days of AI and the AI tooling that we want to leverage. So you need to find out issues faster, and obviously observability tools are there for it. And you come to a company, they spend $1 million a month on some kind of observability tool, and they don't even cover dev or staging. So I think we see that a lot, and I can tell you about ground cover if because we heavily use Kubernetes for our development, and each developer has its own namespace and a complete environment. If we had to pay for this observability with a vendor that is cost the charge by volume, I wouldn't do that. It would just be too much. Spears talk about 5% of the cloud bill. I kind of did the math, and it turned somewhere around 15% of our
Hmm.
cloud bill, and that's insane. Spending 35. Sorry. Okay, okay. That's more the numbers I know. So yeah, so I did the numbers, did the math, and it turned into 15%, and
Hmm.
said no way. And we obviously we use ground cover at ground cover. Well, I don't care anymore. I just don't think about it anymore. We obviously have a lot of case studies over our website about cutting cost reduction with between 70 to 90%. So you can check this out later. But I think just ask yourself if you're running the observability that you want or need in dev or staging
Hmm.
as well as you do for production. I think most companies will say they don't. So and to me that says everything.
Oh, that makes sense. Awesome, man. I appreciate that. And I guess, as we're kind of coming towards the end of this, do you guys have any kind of closing thoughts, additional things that you may have come up that weren't in this big question list, or is there like any additional kind of final thoughts before we kind of wrap up?
Um, I think we should all. I really relate to what Spiro said at the beginning. I think we should all try to find out what is important. That's
Hmm.
that's the first step. And even if you going through, I don't know what I don't know, that's fine. But you still can try. So maybe at first you'll have some missing metrics. Fine,
Hmm.
we'll add it later. That's no problem. Adding more data, always possible. So I would start slow, and I would choose tools that are not coupled to volume because it doesn't correlate to your business value. Um, yeah, that's my take.
Awesome.
Yeah, just to add on this, actually, I'm a big fan of keep it simply stupid principle. So I totally rely with chess, right? Start small, define what is, no, not everything, but what you think could be important. And, start with this, iterate, you're going to learn, through the system and through the iteration, you're going to do more. But be careful to not over abuse as we did all these years, the metrics, the logs, the traces. Just try to be careful with that.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, fellas. I really appreciate it. And let's make sure we don't have any more QA questions. We don't. Awesome. Well, thank you both guys for joining us today. I know it's a little later over there. It's early over here, and I'm hopeful that we've had people all in between the hours across the globe here checking in on this. But like I guess for everyone that's that's on the webinar here, you'll get a link to the recording of the webinar via email shortly. Feel free to share it with it. Anyone you think can benefit from this. If you've got other questions, we're always happy to reach out to Ches, to Spiros, to myself. I'm sure we'd be happy to have a lively conversation. In fact, that's how we got here. Spiros came through a LinkedIn conversation. So we really appreciate you guys joining us today. And we often do these usually every 2 weeks or so. So stay tuned for more great content. And yeah, thanks again, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.